Hey, that was sharp.
It was very sharp. It kind of had that little loud echo.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so welcome.
And kind of not welcome at the same time.
I
Like,
know.
we're in different places.
You know what's really cool is now we could actually talk to them and not necessarily be in the presence of everybody else.
I am so glad I'm not in a room with all of you right now.
But you are in a room with some of them.
Right. That's what I'm glad about. It was a joke.
Okay.
It was meant to sound like
terrible. It is so
terrible.
good to be back in homes. Oh my gosh, we have been waiting for this for what, like 4 months now?
A really long time.
A really long time. I know, but COVID's going away, or it's coming back. I don't know.
I don't know. What?
But y'all have the option to get a vaccine. So because you have that option, we have options now too.
That's right.
I like options.
I like options too.
Well, we are excited. We absolutely love being in homes. We find that it gives us a lot more freedom. Don't worry, we're still going to do a once a month worship gathering. We are going to bring music back. That's going to be great and awesome. But we're excited for the conversations to get to happen, the more comfortable seating arrangements, and hopefully snacks.
Absolutely.
Does your house party have good snacks?
They will.
You know, mine will too. You know why?
Why?
Because I'm buying them.
Great.
Yes. It's basically, what do I want to eat? And that's what I'm going to buy and have out there.
Nice.
So if there's nothing, it just means I'm not hungry.
Corn chips. Just corn chips in Nathan's group.
I bet corn chips are pretty good.
See, that's what I'm saying. You guys are probably having corn chips.
I'm not going to get corn chips.
No dip.
What's like the alternative to a corn chip?
Potato chip?
Anyways,
Pizza chip?
Let's kick it off. We've got some slices.
No, I want to talk more about all the chips.
What's your favorite chip?
Bugles.
Okay, mine is salsa verde Doritos in the green bag.
That's really good.
In middle school, I would get a bag of those every day with my lunch, and they were amazing. Like by the
really
end,
good.
you're like, my mouth kind of burns, but
Yep.
not too much. But
Yep.
it's just so delicious.
Yep.
Way better than Cool Ranch or the regular.
Yeah. All right, we better move on from chips.
Yes. Slices. What do you got?
So there was an Italian mobster, and
Always a good start to a story.
he was escaping from the law because he was really rich. He went to like kind of like a tropical resort place in, I think it was the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And he successfully escaped. No one knew where he was. But then he decided it would be a good idea to start an Italian cooking show on YouTube. And
This runaway mobster.
yeah.
Is the Dominican Republic a non-extradition country?
It is an extradition country because
Dumb.
he thought it was good enough to just have the screen beneath his face so that people wouldn't see his face and find him, but he had tattoos on his arms. And through those tattoos, they realized who he was and they came and arrested him.
I couldn't even understand why he'd want to create a cooking show.
He was bored. And he loves the spaghetti.
But there are so many better things to do when you're bored than to create YouTube videos. No offense to those of you who do that.
It's better than drug trafficking. Like, he went from drug trafficking to making lasagna. That's a win.
Pasta trafficking. I wonder if he got any, like, time knocked off his sentence for good deeds to teaching.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
It's unlikely.
So how long ago was this?
I don't know.
Was it like a COVID thing? Where he's like, it's COVID, I
don't know. I read it right before we came here.
Okay. Well, for my slice, I don't know if you guys ever watch like British TV. I think British TV is absolutely hilarious.
So good.
If you've got the right kind of personality, the right dry sense of humor.
Yep.
So there was this British guy. He's got a Twitter, and he was a little bit bored, and so he decided that he was going to go through and talk about what he thought every single state in the United States was famous for without Googling it. This is what he said. I, a British person, I'm going to list all 50 states and what I believe they're famous for without actually Googling it. So Nevada. He said, to the best of my knowledge, Nevada is famous for losing all of your money in the desert. For Maine, to the best of my knowledge, Maine is famous for lobsters and weird accents in movies. Let's see. I'm going to go find Colorado because that one actually kind of made me laugh. There's actually some of these I can't say because British people are very liberal in their use of language. To the best of my knowledge, Vermont is famous for being the home of a famed socialist and progressive politician, Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
Where is Colorado? It's like super far down here on the list. So you guys should actually Google this and check it out. To the best of my knowledge, Colorado didn't exist until they invented weed a couple years ago. Arkansas, he said, to the best of my knowledge, it's famous for literally nothing. So anyways, there's really nothing super impressive about this, but if you like British people and you like British humor, some of these are quite funny.
It's good.
So I highly recommend. In fact, I'll send you the link because I know that that's something you would actually enjoy.
I will appreciate it for sure.
Yes. Cool. Well, hey, that's going to do it for Slices. We do have a couple things we want to let you guys know. We can do announcements now on here. Next week, we are going to let you guys know the full summer schedule for everything we're going to be doing for you guys. We got barbecues, we've got house parties, we've got worship nights. We're even trying to plan a local in here, our city kind of mission trip, working with some different nonprofits.
Yeah.
Broom hockey, potentially paintball. Anything else?
Not that I can think of, but that sounds awesome.
I know, it's going to be great. And we're going to have a challenge where if you guys successfully complete the challenge, we're going to get to shave Stetson's beard.
This is not true. This is so false.
It's 100% true.
No,
I just said it.
It's not true.
It's on the internet. We have to believe it.
It's not on the internet. Well, I guess as of right now,
Yes,
it is on the internet.
Boom!
Dang it.
Lawyered.
It's not going to happen.
What would it take for us to be able to shave your beard?
If I ever shave my beard, it would be because I did like a fundraiser and like X amount of dollars would have to be raised for a certain amount of charity.
So what do you guys want to do a fundraiser for?
That's what I want to do a fundraiser
What do you
for.
want to do a fundraiser
I don't know.
for?
I haven't.
Hair growth?
No, it would have to be something that actually means something. It's like the bald guy raising money for hair growth.
It's like when Michael Scott does the charity fun run to end rabies.
Yeah. Support the rabid.
This thing is already done. Like, oh, so good.
Okay.
All right, anyways, we are going to be kicking off a new series tonight, new conversation. We're calling it Jesus Is. And really, we want to talk about who Jesus is. So to kick this off, I know you saw this. We kind of referenced it a couple weeks ago, but last month there was a rapper by the name of Lil Nas X who released a limited edition sneaker. There were only 666 pairs of them, and they were black. They had a pentagram, upside down cross. They had like Luke 15:10 written on there, and they have been dubbed the Satanic sneakers. They kind of came out in conjunction with this music video. Now, the sneakers and the music video, they're like super controversial. They're like, all right, come on, dude, what are you doing? You're just trying to anger a bunch of people. But I spent some time looking into it and reading some of the social media interactions that this guy had. And I got to be honest, like the response that a lot of Christians had to these sneakers and some of the things that they said in the name of Jesus were incredibly disheartening. They were hateful.
Yeah, it was sad.
And they were not an accurate representation of who Jesus is or what this kingdom is all about that he came to bring.
Absolutely.
And in one of these dialogues, I saw this thing that Lil Nas said that really stuck with me, and I want to share with you guys. He said this, and he's talking about his childhood here. He said, I spent my entire teenage years hating myself because of some of the stuff that y'all preached would happen to me because I was gay. So I hope you are mad. I hope you stay mad. I hope you feel the same anger that you teach us to have towards ourselves. Right? So here's this guy growing up in Georgia, right? The Bible Belt, who's dealing with all of these questions about who he is and questions about self-worth, wrestling through his sexuality, and his encounters with the church. They weren't good.
Nope, not at all.
They did not reflect who Jesus was. And as a result, this guy then began to develop this image and picture in his mind of who Jesus was that is like the exact opposite of who we see Jesus to be in the Bible.
Yeah.
And the problem is there are millions of other people, millions of other young people just like you guys who could tell a similar story. Maybe you've got friends who this is their story, right? People who have this view of who the church is and this view of who Jesus is and this view of what Christianity is all about that's just not accurate.
Absolutely.
And it's a problem because the reality is, like, the story that we get in the Gospels is like the exact opposite. It's not about hate and judgment. It's actually about love and welcome and embrace and speaking life as opposed to death.
Yeah, and when Christians start to portray Christianity and Jesus in a poor way, that's how people start to see Jesus, which is the whole point behind the series that we're doing, is like, okay, let's actually take a look at who Jesus actually is.
Yeah, so for the next few weeks, that's exactly what we're going to do, right? We're going to kind of set some of our preconceived notions and ideas of who Jesus is aside and just say, okay, like, Jesus, who do you say that you are? And the hope is that we can begin to fall in love with Jesus again, that we can begin to see who he is, maybe even some of you guys for the first time, with the hopes that not only does it change our lives, but maybe it begins to change some of your friends' lives and some of the opinions that they have. And so tonight we're going to kick it off. We're going to talk about this first idea. We're not going to really say it yet. I want to say it towards the end because it's definitely going to be our big idea. But tonight I want to actually look at one of the ways that, no, not one of the ways, actually two of these different ways that Jesus interacted with a specific group of people that probably weren't thought of too well back in this day. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, let's say it at the same time. 1, 2, 3. The
Tax
Dutch.
collectors.
Oh, tax collectors.
The judge?
The Dutch.
The Dutch.
It's not the Dutch.
You don't like the Dutch?
I like the Dutch. I just thought.
Are you Dutch?
No.
Then why would you like the Dutch?
I don't know.
Anyways, we're going to talk about how Jesus interacted with the tax collectors. So Stetson,
The Dutch.
why did people back in Jesus' time not like tax collectors? Why don't you kind of set this up for us as we look at these stories?
Yeah, okay. So you've got the country of Israel, and then you've got the empire of Rome, and then Rome comes in, and long story short, tells the country of Israel, you're ours now, pay us money. And so now all these people have to give up, like, I think, wasn't the tax rate like 60% of their income? Like, so like if you made $10, you would have to give 6 of those dollars to the Roman government. So they're basically stealing all this money for the Israelites. But there were a few people in Israel who started working for the Roman government, collecting that money.
Yeah.
And Israel hated Rome, and they hated tax collectors because they were basically traitors.
Well, and not only that, like, these tax collectors, they would not only take the $6 they had to give the Rome, they would actually take like an extra $1 and say the Romans demanded that of them.
Right.
And so they would not only be stealing to give to the Romans, they would be stealing from their own countrymen to be able to give to themselves. And so some of these tax collectors ended up making ridiculous amounts of money just by stealing it from people.
Yep.
And so it's easy to see why they were hated. Right, they were viewed as these Benedict Arnold traitors who hated their country, who had betrayed their country, and who were taking from the people who needed the money most so that they could pad their own pockets. It was not good, right? So everyone hated them. But what we're going to see is Jesus didn't share that same hatred, right? Jesus didn't interact with them in that same way. He didn't have animosity towards them. He actually exhibited a type of behavior that was much more gracious. And so let's look at the first interaction Jesus has. You want to go ahead and read that? It comes out of Luke 19, 1-10. It's an interaction with a guy by the name of Zacchaeus.
Yeah. So in the Bible it says this. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was Dutch. I mean, he was small in stature, so he's a short guy. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.
See, I love this interaction, right? Because instead of responding the way everybody else does, like with hatred, Jesus actually took the time to get to know him, right? He spent time talking to him. He sat down and had a meal with him. He engaged him, right? He didn't judge him. He just met him where he was at. And the end result, this guy's life literally changed forever, right? You've got this
Yeah.
tax collector who stole all this money. He's like, hey, if I've defrauded you, I'm gonna give it back. And I'm not just gonna give it back. I'm gonna give back like 4 times the amount that I stole from you, and everything else that I have, I'm gonna give to the poor. You see, Jesus' friendship, it took this dude who was basically a thug and a gangster, much like that YouTube chef you were talking about a little bit earlier, right? Like, it took this guy who was a thug, and he literally turned him into a new man. And it didn't start with judgment.
Right.
It didn't start with anger or the how dare you. It was just, tell me your story.
Yep.
Let me meet you right here. You know what it started with? It started with friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a meal. Like, don't discount the power of sharing food together. It's a big deal. Even just corn chips at Nathan's house.
Even just corn chips at my house, right? So that's the first interaction we see. There's another one that comes out of Matthew 9 to 13, and it's with a guy by the name of Matthew.
Yep.
Why don't you read that one for us?
As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician or a doctor, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came to call the I came not to call the righteous, but sinners."
So again, Jesus' approach with this tax collector, it was friendship, right? And this guy, Matthew, he actually became one of the 12 disciples of Jesus that followed around like in all of his time teaching. He's the guy who actually wrote the first gospel that is in our New Testament.
That's why it's called Matthew.
It began with this act of friendship. And like the religious leaders, and you see this here, like they absolutely hated that Jesus was being kind to these tax collectors, right? They were like, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus didn't care.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't interested in what the religious people thought. He was interested in these people who had felt like they were abandoned. And I think we actually even see that at the end there, right? Like that last verse that you read, Jesus says, I didn't come to call the righteous, right? I didn't come to save the people who have it all together. I came for the people who don't. I came for the people who are broken. I came to be a friend of sinners because that's what they need.
Yeah. And not just sinners, but the people who are like on the outside. Like tax collectors, we don't really have a problem with them right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, some people do.
Yeah, your parents might have a problem with the IRS, but it's not the same thing today. But like, I think in today's context, it's pretty easy to guess who the people would be that we would think Christians would most often hate.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where you live, this could be conservatives or liberals. It could be the LGBTQ community, people with different faiths and beliefs. Could be immigrants, refugees, people who have made really bad public mistakes. But if Jesus came today, those would be the exact people that he would be spending his time with and having over for dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think one of the problems that we have sometimes in the church is that we've really been taught to look at things as being like really black and white, right? Like this person is more bad than that person. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that makes sense, right? Like murder is definitely worse than speeding.
I would agree.
Right? You know, I don't think we're going to argue, but I think sometimes we fail to see the reality that like before God, all sin is sin. Mm-hmm. Right? Like for us, we've kind of got these degrees of sin, like, oh, this is worse than that, and this is better than that. Like, it's a white lie, it's not a big lie, right? Like, but we fail to see that before a perfect and holy God, like all of our sin demands that we be cut off from him. Mm-hmm. Like all of it. Sin is this very serious thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been taking some time thinking about sin because it's this religious word that gets thrown around, and I think we've lost a little bit of what it means. But lately, I've been thinking about it like this. Like, if God was in the center of the room, anytime we sin, we're taking a step away from God. So we're walking the opposite direction. But like you mentioned, like I think you mentioned it, sin leads to death, which sounds like a really like intense thing. Like if I like slapped you in the face, I wouldn't die. But I look at it like this: like if sin leads to death, and sin is taking a step away from God. That shows us that God is the source of all life. So let's look at it in the sense of, like, if we were in a desert, like sand as far as the eye could see, but we lived in an oasis that had water, like that water is life. Like that's like God is our source of life. Anytime we sin, we're taking a step out of the oasis into the desert. And even though we're not dying as we step away, we're taking a step away from the source of life and stepping closer to death. And what's happened to us as human beings is we've taken so many steps away from the oasis. We look around the horizon, we can't see it anymore, and we're lost.
Yeah.
That's where Jesus comes in.
Yeah, and so this whole concept of sin, like in the church, we have been taught, rightly so, to avoid it, right, to flee from it. But I think sometimes this ends up kind of being this destructive thing, because then it ends up being this thing like exactly like we talked about at the beginning with that whole thing with Lil Nas X, where people are looking at some of the sin in his life and they're hating that sin. And when they're hating that sin, they begin to hate that person.
Yep.
And we say, well, if there is sin present, God is not present, right? If there is something in your life that is offensive according to our understanding of what the Bible is, then we've got to hate you because we hate the sin that you embrace.
Yeah.
But what we see with Jesus is that he never allowed sin to keep people away from him, right? Like, hands down, what those tax collectors did, like, it was evil. It was wrong. They stole, right? They oppressed people. There was nothing good about that. But Jesus never allowed their sin to create a barrier between him and them. He actually crossed that barrier and stepped into their world, sat down, had a meal, and said, I love you, and I see the potential in who you can become.
Right.
And it was that friendship he chose, that friendship he embodied. That's what made all of that possible.
Yeah, like in that desert context, when he's saying is like, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. I didn't come for the righteous, I came for sinners. So he's like, why am I going to bring buckets of water to people who are already living in the oasis? Like, they have what they need. So he walks out into the desert and basically becomes an oasis for those who are lost, like you and me. Like, we don't think we're like, we've got it all figured out. We're all in the same boat, just wandering around, trying to figure out where is life. And that's why Jesus came, because we were so lost. And he did that because of how much he loves us. It's that friendship component you're talking about.
And that's like John 3:16, right? Like, we all know this verse. I'm sure it's hanging on one of the houses you're in right now. But like, God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, Jesus, right? Like, you know, and you know the whole rest of it, right? Whoever believes in him will not perish but experience everlasting life, right? Like, love is the thing that motivated Jesus to come and to be our friends. And it wasn't a love for us when we had it all figured out. It wasn't a love for us when we believed all of the right things. It was a love for us when we were lost, dying, and alone in the desert.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Man,
it's good stuff.
It's good stuff.
Jesus is pretty awesome.
At the end of the day, I think if we want to experience some of that life change that Zacchaeus did and that Matthew did, if we want some of our friends who are around us who don't know Jesus to be able to experience some of that life change, man, we've got to realize it starts with friendship with Jesus. It's not even like church attendance. It's not reading your Bible or praying. Like, all that stuff is really important. I absolutely think it is. But it's actually getting to a place where we can develop a real life-giving relationship with him. And all that other stuff, it's a component of that, but we can't mistake it for being the real thing. We need friendship with Jesus.
Absolutely.
And so our big idea for the night is what, Stetson?
Jesus is your friend.
Yeah, for real. Like, and it sounds so cheesy, but like,
it does a little bit.
It does a little bit. Don't worry, they're gonna get better. But at the end of the day, like, Jesus is not here to hate you, right? That's what your enemy does. Jesus is not your enemy. He's your friend, and he loves you, and he cares about you. And when we can start to become friends with Jesus, we're gonna start to become friends with people just like Zacchaeus, just like Matthew. Whatever that person is in your life, whoever they are, you're gonna be able to be their friend because of what Jesus has done for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if this sounds like, okay, I get what you're saying, but how? That's a great question to be asking right now because we're about to hang out and talk about this
Yeah,
together.
and that's why we have these house parties. It's so that we could actually process this, right? We don't want it just to be information in that you forget about in 3 weeks. We want this to actually begin to change your life.
Yep.
So we're going to hand it off to all of our house parties. Your leaders have some questions they want to talk with you guys about. They want to pray with you. They want to be your friends. So hope you guys enjoy, and we will be back next week. Cool.
That was great.
Yay.